I thought love was supposed to feel safe, like coming home after years of wandering. That's what I felt when I met Nee. I built her a house with my own hands. Every nail, every tile. I did it because I wanted to prove that not all love has to die ugly. But the day I saw another man sleeping in my bed, I realized the house I built wasn't ours. It was hers. And I was just another story for the village to whisper about, the old Farang who bought love and lost it. This is what happened. This is how I learned that some foundations crumble no matter how carefully you lay them. I never thought I'd end up in Thailand. Hell, I never thought I'd end up anywhere after the divorce. 8 years of drifting through Adelaide's suburbs, working odd construction jobs just to keep my hands busy, watching my daughter grow up through birthday cards and awkward phone calls. That's what my life had become. A quiet arrangement with loneliness. My ex-wife got the house, the friends, the life we built. I got a rental apartment that smelled like someone else's cigarettes and a heart condition the doctor said was manageable. Everything felt manageable. Nothing felt alive. Then Peter, an old workmate who'd retired to Chiang Mai, sent me a message. "Mate, you're rotting away down there. Come see what real living looks like." I booked a ticket 3 days later. Didn't tell anyone except my daughter, who said, "Dad, just don't do anything stupid, okay?" I promised I wouldn't. I meant it at the time. Chiang Mai was beautiful but crowded with tourists taking selfies at temples. Pattaya was worse, full of men my age with girls young enough to be their granddaughters, everyone pretending the transaction wasn't obvious. I felt sick watching it. That wasn't what I wanted. I didn't come to Thailand to buy affection or play out some sad fantasy. I came because I needed to remember what it felt like to want something, anything, beyond my next doctor's appointment. Peter mentioned Isaan over beers one night. "It's the real Thailand, mate. No beaches, no backpackers. Just rice fields and people who smile because they want to, not because you're paying them." He said it like he was describing heaven. I didn't believe him, but I had nothing else to do. So, I took a bus east, toward Khon Kaen, watching the landscape flatten into endless green. The further I got from the cities, the quieter my mind became. I found a guest house run by an old woman who spoke no English but understood exactly what I needed. A clean room, cold water, and silence. Every morning I'd walk to the local market, not buying much, just watching. That's where I saw her, Nee. She was arranging mangoes at her mother's fruit stall, laughing at something an older woman said. Her hands moved quick and sure, and when she looked up and caught me staring, she didn't look away. She smiled. Not the rehearsed smile I'd seen in Pattaya, a real one. "You want mango?" she asked in broken English. I nodded, even though I wasn't hungry. She picked the ripest one, peeled it with a small knife, and handed it to me on a stick. "Special for you. You new here?" I told her I was just visiting. She tilted her head. Visiting or running away? The question hit harder than I expected. I didn't answer. She laughed softly and said, Okay. You come back tomorrow. I teach you Thai words. You teach me English words. Fair?" I came back the next day. And the day after that. Each time, she'd teach me something small. How to say hello properly, how to count, how to say delicious after tasting her mother's somtam. I'd help carry heavy crates when deliveries came. Her mother watched us with quiet amusement, occasionally muttering something in Thai that made Nee blush. After a week, Nee asked if I wanted to see where she lived. My village, very small, very boring. But maybe you like boring? I told her boring sounded perfect. The village was an hour away by motorcycle taxi, surrounded by rice paddies that stretched to the horizon. Her family's house was wooden, raised on stilts, with a corrugated metal roof. Chickens wandered underneath. Her mother greeted me like I was someone important, gesturing for me to sit while she brought cold water and fried bananas. Nee sat beside me, close enough that I could smell jasmine in her hair. "My mother says you have kind face," she translated. She says kind face is rare. I didn't know what to say to that. I just smiled and felt something in my chest loosen, something I thought had been welded shut 8 years ago. That night, sitting on the wooden porch watching the sun set over the fields, Nee said, "You stay in Isaan long time?" I told her I didn't know. She nodded slowly, then said, "Good men always welcome here. We remember good men." The way she said it made me feel like I'd finally arrived somewhere I was supposed to be. like maybe the running was over. I extended my stay at the guest house. 1 week became 2, then a month. Every morning I'd ride out to Nee's village, sometimes bringing fruit or bread from town, sometimes just showing up empty-handed. Her family never made me feel like I was intruding. Her father, a quiet man with sun-darkened skin and hands rough from field work, would nod at me and gesture toward the shade where we'd sit in comfortable silence. Her younger brother, barely 20, treated me like an uncle, asking about Australia and laughing when I tried to speak Thai, but it was Nee who made everything feel right. She had this way of looking at me when I talked, like every word mattered. When I told her about my daughter, about the divorce, about feeling like I'd spent decades building things for other people and had nothing left for myself, she listened without interrupting. Then she'd touch my arm gently and say, "Past is past. Here you can be new person." It sounded simple, maybe naive, but God, I wanted to believe it. I wanted to be new. I wanted to feel like the man I used to be before the mortgage payments and marriage counseling and sleeping in separate bedrooms. One afternoon, I was helping her father repair a section of fence that had rotted through. It was easy work, the kind I could do without thinking. Nee brought us water and watched me measure the posts. "You good with hands?" she said. "You build things before?" I told her I'd been a construction foreman for 30 years. She smiled. "Maybe you build something here. This village needs many things." I laughed it off, but the idea planted itself. Build something. Leave a mark. Prove I could still create instead of just survive. That night, Nee and I sat by the rice fields under a sky so full of stars it felt heavy. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and said, "I think you lonely long time. I understand lonely. After my father's sick, my mother worked so hard. I worked so hard, no time for dreaming. But you come here and I think, maybe life can be different." I asked her what she meant. She turned to face me, her eyes serious. "Maybe we can dream together, you and me." My throat tightened. I hadn't let myself dream about anything in years. But sitting there with her warmth against me and the smell of earth and jasmine in the air, I thought maybe I could. We started spending nights together at her family's house. They gave us the small room at the back, barely big enough for a mattress and a fan, but it felt like a palace. She'd curl up beside me, her breathing soft and steady, and I'd lie awake wondering how I got so lucky. In the mornings, she'd wake me with tea and that smile that made my chest ache. "My honey builder," she'd call me, laughing. "You sleep like old buffalo." I'd pull her close and she'd squeal and push at me playfully. It felt easy. It felt real. Her mother started hinting, gently at first. "Nee, good daughter. She take care of family. She need good man who take care of her too." I understood what she was saying. This wasn't just romance. It was investment, security, future. I didn't mind. I'd spent years taking care of people who didn't appreciate it. Why not take care of someone who did? Someone who made me feel like I mattered. Nee never asked for anything directly, but I could see the weight she carried, the worry in her eyes when bills came or when her father's medicine ran low. I wanted to lift that weight. I wanted to be the man who fixed things. One evening, after her family had gone to bed, Nee and I sat outside under the stars again. She was quiet, tracing patterns on my arm with her finger. Finally, she said, "You think about future?" I asked her what kind of future. She hesitated, then said, "Future with me, here, in Thailand." My heart hammered. I'd been thinking about it constantly but was afraid to say it out loud. "I think about it every day," I told her. She looked up at me, her eyes bright in the moonlight. "Then maybe we make plan. Maybe we build life together. Real life. Not just visiting." I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Yeah. Let's build something real." The next morning, I started sketching plans for a house. Not a wooden house on stilts like her family had, but a proper concrete home with real walls and a solid roof. Something that would last. Something that would prove I wasn't just another tourist passing through. Nee found me drawing in the dirt with a stick and knelt beside me. "What is this?" I told her it was our future. She stared at the lines I'd drawn, then at me, her eyes filling with tears. "You do this for me?" I told her I'd do anything for her. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "You best man I ever know." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. I made the decision over breakfast at the guest house. I'd build Nee a house, a real house. Not as a gift or a bribe, but as proof. Proof that I could still create something meaningful. Proof that I wasn't just drifting anymore. Proof that love didn't have to be a losing game. I called my bank in Adelaide and arranged to transfer a chunk of my savings. The manager asked if I was sure. It's a significant amount, Mr. Cole. Are you investing in property? I told him I was investing in my life. He didn't sound convinced, but the money cleared within 2 days. When I told Nee, she cried. Not quiet tears, but the kind that shook her whole body. You don't need to do this, she kept saying. I don't want you to spend so much money on me. But even as she protested, I could see the hope in her eyes. Her mother hugged me tight and said something in Thai that Nee translated as, she says you are blessing from Buddha. She says our family will never forget this kindness. I felt 10 feet tall. I felt useful. I felt like a man again. We found a plot of land at the edge of the village, close enough to her family but with a view of the rice fields. It cost almost nothing by Australian standards. I hired local workers, men from the village who showed up every morning with smiles and cigarettes, ready to pour concrete and lay bricks. I worked alongside them, ignoring the heat and the ache in my back and the way my heart pounded when I pushed too hard. Nee would bring lunch every day, sitting with me in the shade while I ate, her hand resting on my knee. You work too hard? She'd say. You need to rest. But I didn't want to rest. I wanted to finish. I wanted to see her standing in the doorway of our home. The villagers came to watch. Old women squatted in the shade, murmuring among themselves. Kids ran around the construction site, laughing and kicking up dust. Some of the men asked me questions through Nee's translations. Why you build here? Why not Bangkok? Why not your country? I told them I was tired of my country. I told them Isaan felt like home now. They nodded like they understood, but I caught the looks they exchanged, looks that said, another Farang who thinks he knows what he's doing. I ignored them. I had something to prove, and I was going to prove it. One afternoon, Nee's father came to the site. He stood watching me work for a long time without saying anything. Finally, through Nee, he said, you build strong house, but house is just house. Family is what makes it strong. I told him I understood. He nodded slowly, then added, sometimes Farang build house and think they build love, but love is different. Love is. He trailed off, searching for words Nee couldn't translate. Then he just patted my shoulder and walked away. I didn't know what he meant. I thought I was building both. As the walls went up, Nee started changing. Not in obvious ways, but in small shifts I tried to ignore. She'd spend more time on her phone, texting people she said were friends from Concane. She'd go into town for errands and come back hours later, vague about where she'd been. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile and say, of course, honey, I just busy. Many things to do. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So I buried my doubts under another layer of concrete and kept building. The house took 2 months. 2 months of sweat and sunburn and small victories. When the roof finally went on, the village threw a small celebration. Nee's mother cooked for everyone. There was music, laughter, rice whiskey that burned my throat. Nee stood beside me, holding my hand, and I felt like a king. Our house, she whispered. You and me. I kissed her in front of everyone, not caring who saw. This was our moment, our future, the foundation of everything we'd become. That night, we slept in the house for the first time. The walls still smelled like fresh paint and the floor was bare concrete, but it was ours. Nee curled against me, her breathing soft and even. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with plans. Furniture, curtains, maybe a small garden. I'd stay in Thailand, apply for a retirement visa, marry her properly, build a life that finally felt worth living. I fell asleep with her heart beating against my ribs, believing I'd finally done something right. I didn't know the countdown had already started. I didn't know I was building my own tomb. The cracks started small, so small I convinced myself they weren't real. Nee began sleeping with her phone under her pillow. When it buzzed at night, she'd slip out of bed and take the call outside, her voice low and rushed. Who was that? I'd ask when she came back. Just my friend, she'd say. She has problem. I help her. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. So, I swallowed the knot in my stomach and pretended everything was fine. She started going to Con Cane more often. Market business? She'd explain. I need to buy things for the shop. But she'd leave early in the morning and come back late at night, smelling like cigarette smoke and cheap perfume. Once, I found a receipt in her bag for a restaurant I'd never heard of. When I asked about it, her face hardened. You checked my bag? You don't trust me? The question hit like an accusation. I stammered an apology, hating how defensive I sounded. She softened then, touching my face gently. Honey, you worry too much. I love you. You know I love you. I wanted to know. I wanted it to be true so badly I ignored every instinct screaming otherwise. The bed grew cold. Not physically. The Thai heat saw to that. But the warmth between us vanished. She'd lie facing away from me, her body stiff when I reached for her. I'm tired, she'd say. Or, I have headache. Or, tomorrow, okay? Tomorrow never came. I told myself it was stress. Building the house had been exhausting for both of us. She just needed time to adjust. But weeks passed and nothing changed. She moved through the house like a guest, polite but distant. The way she used to say my honey builder with laughter now came out flat, obligatory, like she was reading from a script she was tired of performing. Her mother stopped by one afternoon while Nee was in town. I offered her tea and we sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally she said something in Thai, slow and careful, like she wanted me to understand even without translation. I caught a few words. Nee. Difficult. Many responsibilities. She touched my hand, her eyes sad. You good man. But. She trailed off, shaking her head. I asked her what was wrong. She just patted my hand and left, leaving me with a dread I couldn't name. I tried talking to Nee that night. Are you happy? I asked. Do you still want this? Want us? She was washing dishes, her back to me. She stopped, her shoulders tense. Why you ask this? I told her I felt like she was pulling away. She turned, her face unreadable. I'm here, aren't I? I'm in the house you built. What more you want? The question stung. I wanted her to want me. I wanted her to look at me the way she used to. But I couldn't say that without sounding pathetic. So I said, nothing. Forget it. She dried her hands and went to bed without another word. I started noticing things. A man's cigarette butts outside the house, a brand I didn't smoke. Motorcycle tracks in the dirt that weren't from my rental bike. A shirt in the laundry that wasn't mine. When I asked Nee about the shirt, she shrugged. Maybe from my brother. He visits sometimes. But her brother didn't smoke that brand. And he didn't visit when I was around. The lies were getting thinner, more careless. Part of me knew. Part of me had known for a while. But admitting it meant admitting I'd built a house on sand. So I swallowed the evidence and kept pretending. One morning, I woke up, and she was already gone. No note, no message. I called her phone. It went straight to voicemail. I waited all day, pacing the rooms I'd built with my own hands, feeling them close in around me. She came back after dark, her makeup smudged, her clothes wrinkled. Where were you? I asked, my voice shaking. She brushed past me. I told you, market business. I grabbed her arm, not hard, just desperate. Nee, please. Just talk to me. She yanked free, her eyes cold. You want to talk? Okay. You want me to say I'm grateful? I'm grateful. You want me to say you're good man? You're good man. But you think building house means you own me? You think money means I belong to you? The words felt like punches. I let go of her arm. She walked to the bedroom and locked the door. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. Was she right? Had I been trying to buy her love? Or had I just been stupid enough to think love could be built like a house, solid and permanent? I didn't sleep. I just lay there, listening to the silence, feeling the walls I'd built become my prison. I had to go to Khon Kaen for a visa extension. Stupid bureaucratic nonsense, but necessary if I wanted to stay. I left early, telling Nee I'd be back by evening. She barely looked up from her phone. Okay, she said. Be safe. No kiss. No smile. Just the hollow words of someone who didn't care if I came back or not. I should have known then. I should have felt it coming. But hope is a stubborn disease. The immigration office was a nightmare of lines and paperwork. What should have taken 2 hours took 6. By the time I finished, it was mid-afternoon, and I was exhausted. I decided to head back early, maybe surprise Nee, maybe try once more to bridge the gap growing between us. The bus dropped me at the village entrance just before 4. I walked the dusty road toward our house, my house, the one I'd built with my own sweat and savings. I saw the motorcycle first, parked under the mango tree. Not mine, newer, a Honda with con cane plates. My stomach dropped. I told myself it was nothing. A friend visiting, her brother, anyone. But my hands were shaking as I approached the door. It was slightly open. I heard voices inside. Low, intimate. I pushed the door wider and stepped into the living room. The bedroom door was open. Through it, I saw them. Nee was sitting on the edge of the bed, our bed, laughing at something. A man stood in front of her, shirtless, young, maybe 30. His hand was on her shoulder. She looked up and saw me. For a moment everything froze. Then she stood quickly, her face flushing. "Harvey, you're back early." I couldn't speak. I just stared. The man turned, grabbing his shirt from the floor. He muttered something in Thai, urgent and low. Nee snapped back at him, then looked at me. "It's not what you think." The words came out automatic, rehearsed. I finally found my voice. "What is it then?" She glanced at the man, who was pulling on his shirt and avoiding my eyes. "He's a friend. He came to help me with something." I looked around the room, at the rumpled sheets, at his boots by the door, at the bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. "Help you with what, Nee?" She crossed her arms, her face hardening into something I didn't recognize. "You don't understand. You come here and you think you save me. You think you build house and everything is perfect. But you don't understand my life." Her voice was rising now, defensive and sharp. "He helps me when you're not here. He understands Thai life. You're just Farang who thinks money fixes everything." The man said something in Thai. She nodded. He walked past me, not looking at me, and left. I heard his motorcycle start and fade into the distance. I stood there in the doorway, my legs weak. "How long?" I asked. She didn't answer. "How long, Nee?" She sat back down on the bed, her face empty of emotion. "Does it matter?" I felt tears burning my eyes. "Yes, it matters," she sighed, like I was being tedious. 2 months, maybe 3. I don't know. 2 months. While I was finishing the house. While I was lying beside her at night, believing we had a future. "Do you love him?" I asked. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the answer before she spoke. "I don't know. Maybe. He's here. He understands me. You." She trailed off. "You what?" I demanded. She shook her head. "You try too hard. You think love is building things, but love is just being." I sank into the chair by the window, my chest tight. "I built this for us. For you." She stood, her voice cold. "No. You built this for you. To feel good. To feel like hero. I never asked for house. I asked you to see me, but you only see what you want to see." I didn't know how to respond. Was she right? Had I been building a fantasy instead of a relationship? Or was this just her way of justifying betrayal? I looked at her, this woman I thought I knew, and realized she was a stranger. "You could have told me you were unhappy," I said quietly. "You could have told me to leave." She moved toward the door. "I did tell you. You just didn't listen." Then she was gone, walking out of the house I built, leaving me alone in the wreckage. I sat there as the sun set, the room darkening around me. I thought about screaming. I thought about smashing the furniture. But I just sat there, numb, staring at the bed where another man had been. The walls I'd built so carefully felt like they were closing in, suffocating me. I'd built a house, but I'd lost everything else. I didn't sleep. I sat in that chair all night, watching shadows move across the walls, my mind replaying every moment, every sign I'd ignored. When the sun came up, I finally stood and walked outside. The village was waking. Roosters crowed. Smoke rose from cooking fires. Everything looked the same, but I felt like I'd stepped into a different world. One where I was the fool everyone had been waiting to see broken. Nee didn't come back that night. Or the next. I stayed in the house, paralyzed by humiliation and confusion. Her mother came by on the third day, carrying a container of food. She set it on the table without looking at me and said something in Thai, her voice low and apologetic. I caught the word sorry. She patted my shoulder once, then left quickly, like she couldn't bear to stay. I realized then that she knew. She'd probably known all along. The whole village knew. I was the only one blind enough to believe the story I'd told myself. I forced myself to go to the market that afternoon. I needed food, needed to move, needed to prove I could still function. The moment I arrived, I felt the stares. Conversations stopped when I walked by. Women whispered behind their hands. One old man looked at me with something like pity and shook his head. I bought rice and vegetables from a vendor I didn't know, avoiding eye contact. As I left, I heard laughter behind me. I didn't turn around. I just walked faster, my face burning with shame. That evening, Somchai, the village elder, appeared at my door. He was maybe 70, his face weathered by decades of sun and hardship. He spoke almost no English, but he gestured for me to sit. We sat on the porch in silence for a long time. Finally, he said, "You good man." His accent was thick, but the words were clear. I didn't respond. He continued slowly, searching for each word. "But you no understand, Isaan. Here, life is." He gestured vaguely at the fields, the village, the sky. "Different. Women here, they think about family, about survival, not just about love." He looked at me, his eyes kind but firm. "You think you build house, you build future. But future here is not same as future in your country." I asked him if everyone knew about Nee and the other man. He nodded. "Everyone know, but no one tell you because they think you will leave. And then Nee's family loses house." The bluntness of it stung. I'd been a transaction all along. A means to an end. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice cracking. Somchai stood, brushing dust from his pants. "You go home," he said simply. "You cannot win here. This is not your place." He walked away, leaving me with the truth I'd been running from. I wasn't home. I was a stranger in a land I'd never understand, no matter how many houses I built. Nee returned a few days later. She came in the afternoon, alone, carrying a small bag. She didn't apologize or explain. She just started collecting her things. Clothes, photos, the jewelry I'd bought her. I watched from the doorway. "Where will you go?" I asked. She didn't look at me. "My mother's house. Or maybe Con Kane. I don't know yet." I stepped closer. "Are you going to be with him?" She paused, then shrugged. "Maybe. Does it matter to you?" I wanted to shout that yes, it mattered, that I'd given up everything for her. But the words stuck in my throat. "I just want to understand," I said quietly. She turned then, her face weary. "There's nothing to understand. You wanted something I couldn't give, and I needed something you couldn't be." She slung her bag over her shoulder. "Thank you for the house. My family is grateful." Then she walked out, her footsteps fading into the afternoon heat. I became a ghost after that. I'd walk through the village and people would avoid me. Not cruelly, just carefully, like I was bad luck. Kids still waved sometimes, but their parents would pull them away. I'd sit on the porch of the house I built and watch the rice fields sway in the wind, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. At night, I'd lie in the bed where she'd betrayed me and stare at the ceiling, wondering how I'd been so blind. The house felt huge and empty. Every corner echoed with her absence. I thought about leaving, but where would I go? Back to Adelaide? Back to the apartment that smelled like regret? I was trapped in the prison I'd built with my own hands. One night, I heard a motorcycle outside. My heart leapt stupidly, thinking maybe it was Nee. But when I looked out, I saw the Honda. His Honda. He was standing by the gate, smoking a cigarette, looking at the house like he was measuring it. My house? I walked outside, my fists clenched. "What do you want?" I called out. He turned, his face unreadable. He said something in Thai. I didn't understand, but the tone was clear. Casual, indifferent. Like I didn't matter. Then he flicked his cigarette into the dirt, got on his bike, and rode away. I stood there in the darkness, shaking with rage and helplessness. I'd lost. And everyone knew it. I lasted another week. A week of sleepless nights and silent days. A week of walking through the village like a ghost, invisible and irrelevant. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think. The house that was supposed to be our sanctuary became a monument to my stupidity. Every room whispered her name. Every corner held a memory of what I thought we had. I knew I had to leave. But I needed to see her one more time. I needed to hear her say it was over. I needed closure, even if it killed me. I sent her a message. Please, just talk to me once. That's all I'm asking. She didn't respond for 2 days. Then, finally, okay, tomorrow, 4 o'clock, at the house. I spent the next 24 hours rehearsing what I'd say. I'd ask her why. I'd ask if any of it was real. I'd tell her I forgave her. I'd beg her to come back. I ran through a dozen scenarios, each one ending with some kind of resolution. But when she arrived right on time, walking up the path with her arms crossed and her face closed off, I knew none of my rehearsals mattered. This wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an execution. She didn't come inside. She stood by the gate, keeping distance between us. You wanted to talk? Her voice was flat, businesslike. I stepped closer. Nee, I just need to understand. Was any of it real? Did you ever love me? She sighed, like I was asking her to explain something obvious. I cared about you. You were kind to me. To my family. But love? She shook her head. I don't know what love is supposed to feel like. I know survival. I know responsibility. You gave us security. I gave you to what you needed. Isn't that enough? The words landed like stones. No, I said. It's not enough. I didn't come here to buy you. I came here because I thought we had something real. She looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Regret? Guilt? But it vanished as quickly as it came. You have good heart, she said quietly. But you live in dream. You think you can come to Thailand and everything will be easy. You think you can build house and I will love you forever. But life is not like that. Life is hard. I need Thai life. I need someone who understands my world. You. She paused, searching for words. You are good man, but you are not my man. The finality of it broke something inside me. So that's it? I asked, my voice cracking. That's all I am to you? A good man who doesn't fit? She nodded slowly. Yes, that's all. She turned to leave, and panic surged through me. Nee. Wait. She stopped but didn't turn around. What about the house? What happens to it? She glanced back over her shoulder. It's not your house anymore. My mother's name is on the land. You signed the papers, remember? I did remember. She'd explained it was easier that way, with the Thai laws about foreign ownership. I'd trusted her. I'd signed everything she put in front of me. So I get nothing? I asked, my voice hollow. She faced me fully then, her expression hard. You get to leave. You get to go back to your country and forget this. That's more than most people get. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to grab her and shake her and make her feel even a fraction of the pain tearing through me, but I didn't. I just stood there, defeated, watching as the woman I'd built a life for became a stranger. Do you even feel bad? I asked. Do you feel anything at all? She looked at the house, at the land, at the fields beyond. I feel tired, she said. Tired of pretending, tired of trying to be what you wanted. I never asked you to build this. You did it for yourself. The accusation hung between us. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had built it for myself, for the image of who I wanted to be. The hero, the savior, the man who could love better the second time around. But that didn't make the betrayal hurt less. I thought we were building a future together, I said, my voice breaking. She shook her head. You were building a dream. I was just trying to survive. She walked toward the gate, then paused and looked back one last time. I hope you find what you're looking for. But you won't find it here. Then she was gone, walking down the dusty road toward her mother's house, her figure getting smaller and smaller until she disappeared completely. I stood there for a long time watching the empty road. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if I could feel anything beyond the numbness spreading through my chest. I walked back into the house, into the rooms I'd built with my own hands, and felt nothing. No anger, No sadness. Just a vast, empty nothing. I'd come to Thailand to feel alive again. Instead, I'd built my own mausoleum and laid down inside it, waiting for the door to close. And now it had. She'd spoken the final words, delivered the last blow. It was over. I was over. Everything I'd hoped for, worked for, believed in, was gone. And I was alone in a house that was never really mine. I spent 3 days sitting on the floor of that house. Not crying, not raging, just sitting, staring at the walls I'd built, running my hands over the concrete, tracing the seams where I'd laid each brick. This was supposed to be forever. This was supposed to be the thing that didn't crumble. But everything crumbles eventually. I learned that in construction. You can build something perfect and time will still tear it down. I just didn't think it would happen this fast. I didn't think I'd be here to watch it fall. On the 4th day, I called my daughter. It was 3 in Adelaide, but she answered anyway, her voice thick with sleep. "Dad, what's wrong?" I told her everything. The house, Nee, the other man, the village, the way I'd believed in something that was never real. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long silence. "Dad," she finally said, "you need to come home." I told her I didn't have a home. She made a frustrated sound. "Yes, you do. You have me. You have people who actually care about you. Get on a plane. Come back. Please." Her voice cracked on the last word, and I realized she'd been worried about me for months, maybe years. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, I'll come back." But before I could leave, I had to deal with the house. I couldn't just abandon it. That felt too much like admitting defeat. I contacted a few real estate agents in Khon Kaen, thinking maybe I could sell it, recoup some of my losses. They all said the same thing. "Foreign-built house in Isaan, land not in your name. No one will buy it." One agent was more direct. "You got scammed, mate. Happens all the time. Cut your losses and go home." The words stung, but I knew he was right. I'd been scammed. Not by some criminal gang, but by my own desperate need to believe I could be loved. That was the cruelest part. No one held a gun to my head. I'd done this to myself. Nee's mother came to the house on the 5th day. She brought food again, like that would somehow fix things. We sat on the porch and she spoke in broken English, apologizing over and over. "I'm sorry. Nee is difficult. She has hard life. She not mean to hurt you." I told her I understood. I didn't, not really, but what else could I say? She was trying to make peace with the situation, trying to ease her own guilt. Then she said something that broke me. "You keep house? You stay?" I shook my head. "No. I'm leaving. Going back to Australia." Her face fell. "But house." I cut her off. "The house is yours. It's in your name anyway. Do whatever you want with it. Sell it. Live in it. Let him live in it. I don't care anymore." She reached out and grabbed my hand, her eyes filling with tears. "You very good man. I tell Nee this, but she young. She don't understand good man." I pulled my hand away gently. "It doesn't matter now." She nodded sadly and stood to leave. At the gate, she turned back. "Buddha will bless you," she said. "You will find peace." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in karma or justice or some cosmic balance that would make this suffering mean something. But I didn't. I just nodded and watched her go. That night, I packed everything I'd brought to Thailand. It fit into 2 bags for 2 years of my life. I left behind the furniture I'd bought, the dishes, the clothes I'd worn while building the house. I left it all like it was evidence of a crime I wanted to forget. I walked through each room one last time, running my fingers along the walls, remembering the hope I'd felt when I'd mixed the concrete and laid the foundation. I'd been so sure, so convinced this was the right choice. And now it was just another mistake in a life full of them. I slept on the floor that last night, my backpack as a pillow. The house echoed around me, every sound amplified by the emptiness. I thought about Nee. I wondered if she was with him now, lying in his arms, laughing about the stupid Farang who built her family a house. Or maybe she wasn't thinking about me at all. Maybe I'd already been erased, just another chapter in her survival story. The thought should have made me angry, but I was too tired for anger. I was too tired for anything except the dull ache of acceptance. This was over. I was over. and tomorrow I'd walk away from the biggest mistake of my life. At dawn, I stood in the doorway one last time. The sun was rising over the rice fields, painting everything gold. It was beautiful. Heartbreakingly beautiful. I could see why I'd fallen in love with this place, with this life. But beauty lies. Beauty makes you believe things can last, and nothing lasts. Not love. Not hope. Not even the houses we build with our own hands. I closed the door behind me and walked away, leaving the key on the kitchen counter. I didn't lock it. What was the point? It wasn't mine anymore. It never was. I moved to Udon Thani. I told myself it was because the flights to Bangkok were easier from there, but really I just couldn't leave Thailand yet. Leaving felt like admitting I'd wasted 2 years of my life. So I rented a small room above a noodle shop, paid month to month, and existed. That's the only word for it. I wasn't living. I was just existing, going through the motions, waiting for something to shift inside me that would make leaving possible. The room was tiny. A mattress on the floor, a fan that rattled, a shared bathroom down the hall. It smelled like frying garlic and exhaust fumes. But it was cheap and anonymous, and no one asked questions. The woman who ran the shop downstairs, a widow named Porn, would bring me food sometimes, refusing payment. "You too skinny?" she'd say in broken English. "You need to eat." I'd thank her and force down a few bites, but I had no appetite. Food tasted like dust. Everything tasted like dust. I spent my days walking. I'd walk through the markets, past the temples, along the lake. I'd watch families laughing together, couples holding hands, old men playing checkers in the shade. I'd see young women on motorcycles with their boyfriends and wonder if any of them were like me, if they were all just playing the same game, looking for the next farang to build them a life. Then I'd hate myself for thinking that way, for letting one person poison how I saw everyone, but I couldn't help it. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal clean. Some nights I'd dream of her. Not nightmares exactly, just memories played on loop. Her laugh, the way she'd call me, honey builder, the feeling of her hand in mine. I'd wake up reaching for her and find only empty space. Those were the worst mornings. The ones where I forgot, just for a second, that it was over, that she was gone, that everything I'd built had crumbled. I started dreading sleep, started staying up late watching Thai TV I didn't understand, just to avoid the dreams. Peter called me one afternoon. He'd heard through expat circles what happened. "Mate, I'm sorry," he said. I never thought. She seemed genuine. I told him it wasn't his fault. He just told me about Isaan. I was the one who'd built the fantasy. "You need to talk to someone," he said. "A counselor. Someone who deals with this stuff." I laughed bitterly. "Deals with what? Stupidity? There's no counseling for that." He was quiet for a moment. "It's not stupidity to want to be loved, Harvey. It's human." I thanked him and ended the call, but his words stuck with me. Was it human, or was it weakness? I still didn't know. 3 months in Udon Thani and I started to feel something again. Not happiness, not even contentment. Just a dull awareness that I was still alive, and that meant something, even if I didn't know what. I started helping Porn with repairs around the shop, fixing a broken table, rewiring a light socket, small things. Things that didn't require emotion, just skill. She was grateful. "You have good hands," she'd say. "You should build things." I told her I was done building. She just smiled and said, "Maybe. Maybe not." One day, a neighborhood kid, maybe 8 years old, asked me to help him build a birdhouse for a school project. His father was working in Bangkok, his mother was overwhelmed. I almost said no, but something in his hopeful face made me reconsider. "Okay," I said, "but you have to help. I'm not doing it for you." We spent an afternoon cutting wood, hammering nails, painting it bright blue. He chattered the whole time in Thai, and I understood maybe 1 word in 10, but it didn't matter. When we finished, he held it up like it was treasure. "Thank you, Uncle," he said in careful English. "Thank you so much." Watching him run home with that birdhouse, I felt something crack inside me. Not break, just crack, like light getting through. I started making more birdhouses. Nothing fancy. Just simple wooden boxes with holes for birds to nest. I'd give them to kids in the neighborhood, to Porn, to anyone who wanted one. It became a ritual. Every morning I'd work on a new one, sanding the wood, painting it, adding small details. It was meditative, purposeful. And unlike building a house for someone who didn't love me, it was uncomplicated. Birds don't lie. They just need shelter. And I could give them that without expecting anything in return. My daughter called every week. "Are you okay, Dad?" I'd tell her I was getting there. She'd ask when I was coming home. I'd say soon. But the truth was, I didn't know where home was anymore. Adelaide felt like a memory from someone else's life. Thailand was tainted by heartbreak. I was caught between worlds, belonging nowhere. "Dad," she said one night, "you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to keep moving forward." I told her I was trying. And I was. One birdhouse at a time. One day at a time. Trying to remember what it felt like to build something without needing it to fill the hole inside me. I decided to leave Thailand, not because I was healed, but because staying felt like clinging to something already dead. I booked a flight back to Adelaide. One way, no plans beyond landing. My daughter cried when I told her. Happy tears. "I've been waiting for this," she said. "I've been so worried." I told her I was sorry for disappearing into a fantasy. Sorry for making her worry. "Just come home, Dad," she said. "That's all I want." So I packed my bags again and prepared to leave the country that had taken so much from me. But before I left, I had to go back to Isaan, back to the house. I told myself I just needed closure, but really, I needed to see it one more time, to prove to myself it was real, that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. I rented a motorcycle and rode out to the village, my heart pounding the entire way. When I arrived, I almost didn't recognize it. There were new curtains in the windows. His motorcycle parked out front, laundry hanging on a line. Someone was living there, someone was making it a home. Just not me. I didn't knock on the door. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want another conversation that would leave me bleeding. Instead, I walked to the side of the house where the wooden post marked the property line. The post I'd sunk into the ground myself, making sure it was level, making sure it would last. I pulled a nail from my pocket, one I'd carried with me since leaving. I pressed it against the wood and hammered it in with a rock. 3 strikes. It sunk deep. I carved a small cross next to it with my pocket knife, not a religious symbol, just a mark. Proof that I'd been here. Proof that this had mattered, even if it ended badly. I stood there for a long time, my hand on the post, feeling the rough wood beneath my palm. "It's not your fault, Nee," I whispered. "And maybe it's not mine either." The words felt strange, almost untrue, but I said them anyway. Because blame was a weight I couldn't carry anymore. She'd done what she needed to survive. I'd done what I needed to feel alive. We'd both been looking for something we couldn't give each other. And that was the tragedy. Not malice, not evil. Just 2 people wanting different things and calling it love. I heard the door open behind me. I didn't turn around. "Harvey?" Her voice, tentative, surprised. I closed my eyes. "I'm leaving," I said. "Going back to Australia. Just came to say goodbye." I heard her footsteps, closer now. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I know." I finally turned to face her. She looked older somehow. Tired. Or maybe I just saw her clearly for the first time. "Are you happy?" I asked. She glanced back at the house, then at me. "I'm okay," she said. "He's kind. He understands me." I nodded. "Good. I hope it works out." She looked surprised. "You're not angry?" I thought about that. I was. But anger takes too much energy. I just want to move on. She stepped closer, her eyes searching mine. "I never wanted to hurt you." I believed her. That was the strange part. I actually believed her. "I know," I said. "You were just trying to survive. I was just trying to matter. We were playing different games." She nodded slowly. "Will you be okay?" I smiled. A real smile, maybe the first in months. "Eventually. I'm working on it." She reached out like she might touch my arm, then stopped. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything. For the house. For trying." I took a step back. "Take care of yourself, Nee." Then I walked to my motorcycle, started it, and rode away. I didn't look back. Not once. The flight to Adelaide was long. 30 hours of layovers and cramped seats and bad coffee. I spent most of it staring out windows, watching clouds and oceans pass below. I thought about the last 2 years. The hope, the work, the heartbreak. Part of me wanted to regret it all, to call it a mistake and bury it deep. But I couldn't, because even in the pain I'd learned something. I'd learned that building things, real things, lasting things, requires more than materials and effort. It requires honesty. It requires two people wanting the same future. And it requires accepting that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, the foundation just isn't solid enough. My daughter picked me up at the airport. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You look terrible," she said, half laughing, half crying. I told her I felt terrible. "But I'm here," I added. "I'm home." She drove me to her place, a small apartment in the suburbs. "You'll stay with us until you figure things out," she said. It wasn't a question. I met my grandson for the first time. He was 3, with wild blonde hair and my daughter's smile. He looked at me with curiosity and said, "Are you Grandpa?" I knelt down. "Yeah, buddy. I'm Grandpa." He hugged me, this tiny human who didn't know about Thailand or heartbreak or stupid old men who built houses for the wrong reasons. He just knew I was family, and that was enough. I got my own place eventually. Nothing fancy. A 1-bedroom unit with a small balcony. But it was mine. Really mine. No lies. No complications. I started doing handyman work around the neighborhood. Small repairs, building decks, fixing fences. Word spread that I was reliable and cheap. Soon I had more work than I could handle. It felt good, honest. I wasn't building monuments to my ego anymore, just fixing things that were broken, including myself, slowly. Some nights I still think about her, about Nee, about the house in Isaan and the dreams I built there, but the ache is different now, softer. Like an old injury that reminds you it's there when the weather changes but doesn't stop you from moving. I don't hate her. I don't even miss her, not really. I miss the idea of her. The version I created in my head. But that woman never existed. And accepting that has been the hardest and most necessary thing I've ever done. I'm building a new birdhouse today. For my grandson. He wants to hang it in his backyard and watch the birds come. He helps me measure and cut, his small hands clumsy but eager. "Why do birds need houses, Grandpa?" he asks. I think about that. Because everyone needs a safe place, I tell him. Somewhere they can rest. Somewhere they belong. He nods seriously, like this is the most important information he's ever received. "Do you have a safe place?" he asks. I look at him, at my daughter watching us from the kitchen window, at the life I'm slowly rebuilding from the wreckage. "Yeah," I say. "I think I do. And for the first time in 2 years, I mean it."